Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. For the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about quality, more specifically QCS for SyteLine, also known as Cloud Suite Industrial these days. As we go through today's presentation, we invite you to send us your questions related to what you're seeing. You can do that by sending them through the GoToMeeting chat panel, which should be over on your right, and we will read those off as we have question and answer time right after the presentation. Our presenter today is Ken Liesengang. Ken is focused on helping SyteLine users achieve the most value for their ERP software investment. Ken brings over 25 years of experience with SyteLine ERP, including programming, consulting, and project management. He's the founder and the former president of RSVP Business Systems, an Infor partner based in New York, which Infor later purchased in 2011. RSVP was the original developer of the QCS solution that we're going to look at today. More recently, Ken has focused on implementing and enhancing both QCS and SyteLine with a strong focus on industries including aerospace and defense, medical device, and automotive. Ken recently authored a piece called Enhance and Extend Your SyteLine and QCS Implementation in the spring 2015 edition of the Sun newsletter. Ken's got a passion for quality, and it certainly shows in his enthusiasm as he works with clients. Ken, we appreciate you being with us today, and the mic is yours.
Very good. Good morning, and first of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to meet with you folks today. As mentioned, what we're going to be doing for about the next 30 minutes or so is taking a closer look at SyteLine and quality and how the two can help you run your business more efficiently. The format for the presentation today is going to be a combination of a PowerPoint slide presentation, and we're also going to be spending a lot of time on the actual software itself. Given the nature of the book we have for the presentation, we'll like to ask you to hold questions until the general end, when we'll open it up and then take questions from the audience at that point. So as a way to begin, listed on the screen here are some of the many challenges that every organization faces in the area of quality. And this is regardless if you're ISO certified or not, TS certified or not. Things like controlling non-conforming material, reporting the cost of quality, complying with regulatory requirements, improving our efficiency. These are all things that are near and dear to part of every quality manager. And often when I'll talk with a company directly, the quality manager will pipe in and say that he or she can easily add another half dozen or a dozen things onto this list of what they're trying to do with their system. Our goal with the QC software is to be able to help you be able to address these challenges, to be able to answer these questions, to be able to help you as a user of the SyteLine system more effectively and efficiently execute your quality system. So a couple of words I want to highlight in this. You'll see highlighted in red the word execute. We're very much focused on the transaction side of activities. So things like receiving and moving and shipping and returns and production, those are all things where product is moving. That's where very much we're generating a lot of transactions inside SyteLine. That's a lot of where QCS is focused, in contrast with some of the earlier product development and other activities that often occur before the production cycle. Above that, you see the words effectively and efficiently. Effectively, we're trying to provide as much functionality as we can as would be called out commonly in your quality management system. So our goal is to help support your quality management system. And by efficiently, everything that we're going to be taking a look at today is inside the SyteLine application. And it's a part of SyteLine. So it's the same user interface, navigation, database schema, user authorization management, reporting hierarchy. All those capabilities that you're already familiar with inside SyteLine are now extended to include the QC software as a part of your implementation. So as a way to begin, what I have listed here on the screen is a very high-level view of how material flows through the SyteLine application. The process will often begin with something as simple as receiving material from a purchase order into inventory. We would then issue that raw material out of inventory to a production, a job, a shop floor work order. We would take whatever we made, a sub-assembly, a finished good, put that back into inventory, and then hopefully at some point we're going to ship product out to our customers. What we've done with the QC solution is to recognize that at each of these points where material is being handled is to recognize that there are also often quality requirements that need to be executed concurrent with the basic material tracking provided by SyteLine. So for example, At the point when we are receiving material into our facility, SyteLine is going to update the purchase order, update inventory. It's going to notify accounts payable that there should be a bill coming from this particular vendor. To those activities, the QCS supplier module recognizes there's often a receiving inspection process. The product needs to be tagged, identified, perhaps brought into QC for inspection, disposition as a part of that receiving process, and that's the functionality that the QCS supplier module adds, and that's actually one of the things we'll be taking a first-hand look at in just a couple of moments. On the production side, SyteLine does a great job of providing a production plan. It gives you bill of material, routing, costing, scheduling, all the things you need to manage the basic production of the product. To that production plan, QCS adds in a quality plan, identification of the QC checkpoints and the data that needs to be collected during the production cycle to complement and support and work with the basic production plan that's already inside SyteLine. And last but not least, as far as our discussion today is concerned, is the QCS customer module. And there's actually three major pieces of functionality here. One of those is an outbound shipping control, that if you want to have your organization be authorized to ship product to customers only after it's been approved by the quality department, that lock and key to be put on inventory to control the ability for someone to ship product to your customers. In the unlikely event there is a customer return, and a few of our customers have this, and a few of you might have this, but in the environment where there's a customer return, often that return needs to be brought back into the quality department first thing to take a look at and decide what we're going to be doing with this product from a customer RMA standpoint. And third is a customer complaint tracking capability, the ability to listen and record the voice of your customer, what they're telling you about your products, the feedback that they're providing, and the tracking response to those particular activities. And again, those are all three things that are part of the customer module. So collectively, these three comprise 3/4 of the QCS suite, and this is where we'll be focused on talking about today. And for our first step in the cycle, we're going to be taking a closer look at the QCS supplier module. So what you see listed on the screen here is a representative process flow diagram corresponding with the basic receiving inspection process for a company. So it would begin with something, again, as basic as a purchase order receipt, and the first thing that we need to ask ourselves is, this product need to be brought into the quality department for inspection disposition, or is this something that can be put into inventory to be made available for production use? If we do, bring it into QC, we can inspect the product, optionally choose to record the results of that inspection, and then be ready to ask ourselves the disposition question if we're going to accept this product or not. If we do choose to accept it, then we can move it on to inventory. If we choose not to accept it, then we can either decide that we are going to immediately reject the product and be done with it, or we might choose to initiate an MRB, a material review board type of process within our organization. That MRB process, I've heard that term from the hundreds of organizations I've dealt with, labeled or had an acronym as anything from NCR, non-conforming report, NCMR, non-conforming material report, DMR, discrepant material report, IRR, internal rejection report, PDR, product deviation report. A lot of companies have a lot of different acronyms, but we're basically all talking about the same thing. We have product. We either know it's non-conforming or suspect it to be non-conforming, and what's the process that our organization is going to use to manage the review and ultimately the final disposition of that product. So after that review cycle has been conducted, one of the outcomes will always be to say, are we going to accept this product after all, rework or whatever needs to be done, or are we going to go through some type of reject cycle, which might be a scrap or return to vendor or some other activity. We also may choose to initiate a CAPA, a corrective action, preventive action, or a CAR, corrective action review, or a SCAR, supplier corrective action review. Again, lots of different acronyms there as part of the review, as part of the outcome of this non-conformance, with the intent being to correct whatever it was alleged to have this non-conformance, so that hopefully we don't have this activity again. So from a basic process flow standpoint on the receiving inspection side, this is always one of the things I lead with talking with customers. And at this point, what I would commonly do is to ask the quality manager who's in the room how this process flow corresponds to either what you're currently doing or what you'd like to be doing. And the answer, 99.44% of the time, is that this is exactly what they want to see. There might be some minor variations, but this is the basic process flow. And for purposes of our on-hand product demonstration today, what I'm going to do next is we're going to hit a key. We're going to jump out of the PowerPoint area and over to the actual SyteLine application that I already have set up here. And we're going to begin at the very first step in that process. We're going to be doing a basic purchase order receiving activity. So what we're looking at here is SyteLine 9. The majority of the software is available with SyteLine 8, SyteLine 7. We can talk about that later if somebody has a question on that. But again, for our purposes here, what we're going to be doing is working with the standard SyteLine purchase order receiving form, identify that we want to receive this material in. I think this is where it's supposed to go. It's going to assign a lot number for me. And when I hit the receive button, again, I get the standard information messages from SyteLine about the lot number being created from that activity. And then the next thing that's happening is QCS now is doing its work and is basically asking the question, is this a receipt that needs to be redirected into the quality department for inspection and disposition? And the screen that we see here, this message box that we see here, is the first point where something new, something different is happening within the SyteLine application as a result of QCS being installed. The first thing you'll see is a reference to a receiver number, in this case 147. This is a unique, numerical, automatically assigned number that's chosen by QCS in sequence, and everything that happens to this receipt from a quality perspective, the receipt, inspection, disposition, non-conformance, corrective action, test result, defect failure, all the quality activities that we can surround with this receipt are all going to point back to this receiver number 147. Next thing that comes in the door is 148, next one's 149. So again, we're assigning a unique control number in sequence. You'll note also that I thought I was going to put it in the raw-1 and QCS is identified for me, but it should be bringing this product over to a location that on my demonstration here is set up as a QC inspect location. So we're providing material direction, material put away instructions to the receiving clerk about where this product should be put away to. There are also other messages here. We have notification to the receiving clerk at the point of receipt. So part of our procedure often includes when the product crosses our threshold, there's some things we immediately need to do. In our case here, I'm instructing the receiving clerk to check for scratches on the box and also look for a certificate of conformance or other type of heat treat material cert or other documentation that should be a part of the product that we're receiving from our customers. Once I've acknowledged this message, I can click OK. There is going to be a tag that will be automatically printed if we want that would identify the QC status of the tag from a receiving standpoint. And at this point that we're done and we're ready to move on to record the next purchase order receipt within the system. So what we saw at this first step in the process is QCS identified it was a quality controlled item. As a result of that, created a unique receiver number, routed it to a QC inspection area, provided material handling notification, notification of paperwork requirement, and printed out a tag for us, all to make sure with the goal that when it comes into our facilities being handled correctly per our quality management system. So I'm going to take a sip of coffee here just for a moment. Anyway, I talk too fast. So our next step then is now that we've brought the product into our facility, decided it needs to go through QC, the next thing we're going to do is be in the quality inspection area. And whether that area is physically its own laboratory area inside the production plant or it sits right alongside the receiving dock area, the idea is that we do have somebody now who's going to be looking to record the inspection disposition information of the product. So as we see when quality is installed, there's an additional module folder where all of this capability with the QCS is provided, and the one that we're going to be taking first look at here is the QC Supplier Inspect Disposition form. Again, another standard SyteLine form, and you'll see it includes reference to receiver number 147, which is the one that we just created. It knows the purchase order, it knows the item, it knows the vendor, it knows the date, it knows the quantity, and at this point we've not yet done any work. So here I have a simple notepad available for me where I can record some text-based information, and on the bottom of the form is where we're going to look to record the disposition of the product and or record test result information. So I'm going to do the test result one first. This is an optional piece if you choose to use it or not. But basically what we're identifying here is that David Green is going to be performing an inspection on this particular batch of product. And what we're going to be doing here is deciding that we're going to record pieces information, and I'm saying that we're going to use 5 pieces as our sample size, and the software now is going to create a test result set for us to work from where it's identified, and now I'm expected to record some length measurements on this product, thickness measurements, smoothness to finish measurements. In other words, I basically have the inspection criteria called out for me here, and I can put in the values as I record the individual pieces. So as I'm recording these individual values, the software is smart and recognizes that 4 of the 5 that I entered in met the criteria. It's my decision about how significant being in or out of tolerance is. I also have a summary display here that shows us of all the inspection criteria that we have. The one that we recorded again was the length criteria, so we tested 5, 1 failed. Here was the lowest minimum value, here is the highest largest value, and here is the average value of the pieces conducted. So this test information here is based upon a test inspection plan that would have been set up in advance on the system. It could vary from product to product, or there can be families of tests that you commonly have across a number of products to ease the data entry process associated with it. You can record tests on a batch basis where you're just providing summary information. You record it on a piece-by-piece basis if you want, or there is the ability to record defect failure information. Also, that would enable you to record defect information in addition to or in place of the other test information that we're looking at. So that's a very brief look at the test result entry associated with it. Our next step is going to be to ask the question, are we going to accept this product or not? And here now we have a disposition form that will be provided to us that will allow us to record the disposition of some or all in this 100. So in this case, the inspector that we're going to say is doing the recording is Susan Hathaway. And Susan has determined that of the 100 that we had coming in, 90 of them were good. And there is a reason code about they passed inspection, and disposition is going to be moved to stock. And then we're going to take the other 10 of these and we're going to put these on hold because they need further inspection. So a couple of points I want to pause for here just to highlight a couple of things. We're not only saying are we accepting or rejecting the product, but we're also providing information on why we're rejecting the product and what the disposition is going to be. And one of the things occasionally we'll hear from people, all I want to do is say 90 good, 10 bad, and we're good to go, and we have a way to automate that if you want. But most of the time the companies want to go the next step and say, I'm going to make you record a reason code for me, and I'm going to make you record a disposition code for me. You see the software now is acknowledging that I don't have a value in here, so when I go to get the process, it says I have to have a valid code. So when I type in a code, I'm just going to type in whatever just because I want to get past this. And the first thing that did is software validated that, so it's forced me to pick and choose from the entries that I've set up in the system. And this is a case, an example of where whatever you have documented in your quality management system or reasons that you accept purchased product, that list of codes, that list of values is what will be entered here. Whatever your list of acceptable dispositions are of accepted product would be listed here. And there's a similar list, as we'll see a little bit later, for rejected and also for quantity, putting things on hold at this point. So now that we do have the form filled out correctly, I can tell the system if I want to print accept tags and hold tags or reject tags. It can optionally send out an alert email message to the quality team notifying that we have a new MRR that's been created, in this case the MRR number 27, and depending upon how your system is configured, you may choose or may not to choose to have a product that was in QC inspect be moved over to some other stockroom location, and this is the basic, the standard SyteLine quantity move transaction. So that 90 that we said were good, we now have moved out of the inspect area over to a different stockroom location. And we can close out this form. And we come back and take a look at now and see that our receiver has been updated to identify that of the 100 that we had coming in, 90 were good, and 10 were placed on hold. And again, if we switch back to our PowerPoint presentation from a process flow standpoint, we took a look at the brief look at the ability to record inspection result information in the system. We decided to say 90 were good, went down this path, and the other 10, we initiated an MRB, or in the QCS terminology, MRR, Material Review Report document, and that's going to be our next step in the cycle, is to take a look at what kind of capability we have to record non-conformance type of information inside QCS. So again, what I'm going to pull up here now is the MRR form. Again, this is another standard SyteLine SyteLine document, SyteLine form. At the very top of the list is the one that we created just a moment ago, where we've identified that we had this item AL 10,000 and a couple of things to note. MRR 27 knows it came from receiver 47 that came in on purchase order 6 from Comex Metals as the vendor. So a lot of that information that we want to capture on the NCR was put there automatically without having to lift a finger. And for a number of companies that I talk with that are, used to be using manual systems or non-integrated systems or simple Excel spreadsheet things, this alone is valuable because it makes sure that I get the information in the form complete and correct with zero effort. And too often, they will share with me experiences of someone wrote down the wrong PO number. They forgot to book the vendor on there. They transposed digits on the part number. They didn't get the right quantity information. There's a whole bunch of things that can go wrong, often will go wrong. Those manual paper-based systems, and by contrast with QCS, we're now in a position where we can get this information correctly and completely filled out without anybody having to lift a finger, so to speak. So that said, with all this information automatically filled in, there is a lot of white space, a lot of opportunities for us to put in. So I'm going to put in a text-based description over here. So box is flat, and ends of 10 pieces damaged. So this is a text-based kind of message over here. And we can just put in whatever kind of information we want. And we can also record it as a code information. When we do our cause analysis, we can identify the shipping material being used during shipping or packing by a vendor. At some point, somebody's going to determine the cause of this. And in this case, we're going to blame the supplier for this particular issue. So text-based information can be as many lines of information as you want. And there's also a cause code, reason code, category ways that we can identify so that we want to begin to do Pareto type of analysis on our non-conformances. Now we have a cause code information. We can ask the question of all the non-conformances, what are the most common typical causes basically have on the list. And again, this list is one that I work with you, we work with you to set up during the training and implementation to make sure that with the list that fits your company requirements from a data collection, reporting, and analysis capability. So once we've identified the problem, we've identified the cause of the problem, part of an MRB process is to ask the question, do we have any containment issues to address? Do we have existing inventory, existing purchase orders, existing product on the shop floor, existing units out in the field? So I'm just going to say, from a containment standpoint, it's just been corrected to the shipment. The next area is corrective action. This is where there's actually two different routes that we can go. The most simple one that few companies will do, smaller companies, simpler companies will do, is commonly put in a note here, say fix the machine shop, and they're done with a particular corrective action. For many companies, however, the process can be more involved in that, where there will be a separate corrective action process. And what I'm showing here is that I can either choose to link to an existing corrective action document. In other words, this is another instance of a non-conformance that we're already addressing with an open corrective action document, or I could choose to create a completely new corrective action document if I want, and the software will create my car for me. At this point now I have car number 14, and if I click over now I have a separate form, a corrective action form with the common, not all of the 8D, but many of the common elements associated with an 8D corrective action environment. Again, similar text box fields of information, the ability to put in codes associated with it, identify the cause, identify the corrective action, and then monitor the implementation of that corrective action. And if any preventive action is required, a whole bunch of dates and other information associated with it. So there's a lot of things available with the corrective action form that can be linked with a non-conformance document as well as a standalone version of a corrective action form. So at this point, we've talked about what I think of as the meat and potatoes of this. We've identified what the problem is. We've identified the cause. We've answered the containment question. We have a strategy in place for how we're going to be going about correcting this. One of the other areas the QCS supports is the ability to record cost of quality, or in our case here, more accurately, cost of core quality as a part of this activity. So too often, I believe that this area is an underappreciated, underutilized, undervalued aspect of QCS. And from my perspective, the moment that we decided that we had to have 10 pieces of AL 10,000 go on hold, anybody and everybody who touches is involved in determining the final disposition of these 10 pieces is now contributing to the cost of core quality, because the only reason we're doing them is because we had this bad product. So in my case here, it might be that we had to have somebody from the engineering department come down and spend an hour of their time that we value at $100 an hour to identify the problem. Once we identified what the problem was, in order to correct the problem, what we're going to need to do is to do some type of repair activity. And it's going to take 2 hours that we value also at $100 an hour. Part of any corrective activity, of course, would need to include a re-inspection of the product. It might take another hour of time and also value $100. And by the time we're all said and done, we've identified that we have 4 hours of our time, $400 of our money tied up in dealing with this non-conformance that we had. And this information is valuable for management to identify how much time, questions like how much time and money is engineering spending in support of quality activities versus doing engineering activities. So there's really an opportunity cost there here, because if they're supporting quality, they're not doing design, they're not building the next product line for the company and all the other things that the engineering folk would be involved in doing. We might ask questions such as how much time and money are we spending with purchases of AL 10,000 in general, and then we also might ask how much time and money are we spending on purchases from Comex metals, whether it's AL 10,000 or some other part. So there's a wealth of data, a wealth of valuable information that can be available to us if we take the few simple steps identified here to identify the cost of poor quality associated with non-conformances. So with that said, I'm going to take one more sip of my coffee here. The next thing we need to do is the final answer, the final disposition associated with this product. And in my case here, we're going to identify that we could accept some, but I'm just going to, for time purposes, quickly identify that we're going to reject the 10. The reason that the product is rejected is because of a packaging issue. The disposition of what we're going to do with this product is scrap, sort. There is a return to vendor capability as well, and we might choose to identify the cost associated with it. And again, I can hit the process button. We're going to have record the final disposition. We're going to have a final reject tag associated with it. If the quality department wants to issue that material out of inventory, they can do the issue transaction at that standpoint. And if we come back to our basic flow diagram, we can see we basically have walked this process all the way from the receiving dock area into the quality department, record results information, accept some of the product, put the other product on hold, go through that whole MRR review, optionally create a corrective action document, and then ultimately have a final decision associated with that entire receipt, the 100 that originally came in as well as the 10 that we put on hold at one point. So that's an example of a type of process that we support with QCS. And I did the one for receiving inspection here, as we'll see a little bit later. There's a similar process flow mentality, a process view of things that we have with everything that we do with QCS, because you'll see these flow charts that are available and several other variations on the same basic theme. A couple of points I want to identify here. One of them is that with supplier receivers, what I demonstrated here was purchase order receiving. That's a planned activity, and it can also be other ones that come in on a vendor RMA that need to be directed into quality. However, stuff happens. Things can happen well after the point of being initially inspected and disposition. It can happen just sitting in inventory, being moved in inventory, issued to a job during production testing. There's a whole bunch of other issues that can occur with parts during some point after that initial receipt of the product. So what we did here was to put together a quick reporting, a quick capability that enables anyone, and this is typically deployed in a kiosk type of fashion. Basically what I'm going to do here is identify that we're going to say I found some bad cushion grips out here. There were 5 of them. Where I found them was on the floor. I'm putting the word cracks over here, and I hit the process button. And what the software is going to do for me now is create a tag for me. It's going to create a receiver 148. It is going to create a MRR number. It happens to be 128. It could optionally automatically send that email out to the team, and we're done. So the mentality that we had in putting this quick reporting capability is if I'm a production person, a material handler, somewhere within the organization beyond the receiving dock, if I have a problem part, I want to report that problem and get back to work as quickly as we can. And the mentality that we provided as direction to the people doing the program was to model it after my typical ATM transaction. I'm expecting I'm going to walk up to the machine, slide in my card, type in a few numbers, get my money, get my receipt, and be done within 30 seconds or less. We wanted that same mentality here. I have a problem part. I want to report the problem part. I'm going to get a trouble ticket printed on it, and then I want to get back to work. So that quick mentality is one of the popular features that people use when they're looking to recognize that quality things happen other than just in that quality environment like we saw demonstrated just a moment ago. So there are a number of things related with QCS setup where there's an item master that is an extension of the QC item master. I'm going to pull that up just as one example of some of the setup files associated with QCS. I'm going to close off that activities folder. And we're going to take a look at QC items over here. So this is an extension of the SyteLine item master. And this is where I'm going to pull it up just for this AL. 10,000 item where we can identify here is how it knew that check the scratches method and the CSD notification, and here's the test plan that was identified for that particular entry and a screen that we can use to record all the details, including the gauges that are used with it. So this QC item master is an extension to, it's a complement to, it adds in the quality profile of the items that are already existing in the SyteLine item master. And it's often one of the common areas to talk about setup and other activities with QCS. There are other codes, so this list of codes for reason, disposition, cause. There's a gauge master that's included that often replaces gauge tracker or others, some basic gauge tracking capability. It does include the ability to identify the profile, the calibration history of the gauge, and also call out where a gauge has been used in the event of a recall due to a suspect problem with the gauge. On the reporting side, there's a number of standard reports that come with all the QCS modules. You see listed on the bottom. And then there are some supplier-specific reports. We do a vendor performance report that quantitatively measures the product quality and the product delivery performance of your vendor and makes it so you truly have push a button, get a report based upon a scorecard that you establish that you can give to your vendor and identify we are tracking your quality both from a product quality standpoint and a delivery performance standpoint, and we can provide standard reports to do that. There's also PPMRA, there's also a vendor RMA tracking stuff document that's available as well. So collectively, those three pieces of information are the ones that are the centerpiece of what the QCS supplier module is about. Moving on to the QCS in process module, the good news about the QCS in process module is that it is exactly the same as the QCS supplier module, only it's different. Commonly, I pause for a little bit of laughter there, but the key message that I'm talking about here is that all of these terms that we took time to talk about with the supplier module, all this idea of codes, receiver number, inspection plans, test results, non-conformance, corrective action, cost of quality, all those things that we saw in the supplier module that occurred in conjunction with a purchase order with an outside vendor and occurred during receiving, all those same principles, all those same concepts, the same terminology carries forward into the QCS and process module. The difference is, rather than point outside to a vendor, we're going to point inside to a work center. Rather than have a purchase order document, we are now going to have a job order document that we track to the work center level. And rather than track things during receiving inspection, we provide ways to complement, track, tie in with SyteLine on the production side. So there's commonly a fair amount of time in training on the first module, whether it's the supplier module first, the in-process module first. But once we move on to the other modules, because of the commonality, because of the base foundation, because of similarity in concepts, the whole training implementation cycle often goes quicker with the second and third modules because everybody in the company kind of already gets what we're doing with QCS. On the production side of things with QCS in particular, it complements what SyteLine does. So I have listed here all these gold bars that correspond to activities that you do inside SyteLine. So somewhere along the way, somebody's going to create a job either manually or via the planning system. Somebody's going to release a job, whether it's the planner or the production control folks, and then they're going to step through each of the operations, 10, 20, 30, and 40. For each of these gold bars, there can be a corresponding red bar that identifies the corresponding step inside QCS that occurs whenever this other SyteLine activity occurs. So for example, and every company is different in this area, at Operation 10, I have this set up to say all that we're going to do is record disposition, accept, reject, no test results. Operation 20, we're not doing anything quality related. We get to Operation 30 where we have some assembly work. Now I'm going to record disposition and I'm going to record test results and have a final stage, a final system level test as opposed to a unit test. We're going to have an additional set of results, an additional set of disposition activities. So again, this is one of the ways in which things can be set up. And if I jump over to the IP inspection disposition side of things, you'll note that this form that I have listed here so this is for a job that I created earlier this morning on the system, and you'll note there is a receiver step corresponding with each operation. Like we saw, there's a notepad capability. Like we saw there before, there's disposition and record defect information. So the same codes like we saw on the supplier inspect disposition form, that same basic form layout is shown here. And again, like before, we have the ability to record. So at this point, we're seeing a screen for the QC in process for a job inspection disposition. Notice it's very similar to the one that we saw for the supplier module. In this case, I'm going to identify that Brenda King was the inspector, that we worked on 5 units for this particular order, of which we have 3 of them. They're good. And again, we have the same selection of required reason and disposition codes. And like before, I'm going to be taking 2 of these and putting them on hold, recording the disposition of this, optionally sending an email out. And we now see that we've created MRR number 29, which would be a new non-conformance for created that will now be pegged against this job DJ 336. So if I slide over to the non-conformance screen and refresh my display, we'll see now at the top of the list, we have that FA 30,000 item cross-reference to the job that we were working on at the final assembly area, and we're seeing now the same non-conformance screen like we saw for the supplier side of things. And in fact, this is one of the, again, most important messages about QCS, is that commonly I will ask the quality manager, do you have a system for tracking non-conformances? And the most common response is, heck yes, I've got 4 of them. They use an Excel spreadsheet on the receiving dock. They have an Access database on the shop floor. The guys over in the machine shop area use some kind of paperwork thing that nobody knows exactly how it works. And the guys in shipping have their own program that they wrote to do it. By contrast, what we're offering here with QCS is the ability to have a single system that can be used to track all the non-conformances throughout the entire organization. So like the one that we saw here, that was pegged to that job, we saw one that came from inventory where it didn't have a reference to an order. This is one that is tied into that purchase order 6 that we were looking at before. These are tied into customer orders. There can be RMA orders, as we'll see later on. So again, the message here is we're looking at a single system that can be used to track all the non-conformances throughout the entire organization. The principles of filling out this form are very similar to what we saw in the case of the supplier module. So again, this is one point where there's very much similarity between the two. I do want to point out briefly that in addition to this first method that I showed of having QC operations be tied with and a part of regular SyteLine operations, some companies choose to have QC activities be separate, distinct operations that are placed in between production operations. This has some different aspects associated with it, that they're commonly more operation numbers just for QC, but it does have the advantage that you now can schedule QC time the way you schedule other production time. You can track QC inspection costs if you want, the way you track other production costs in the system. So again, these are all choices and variability that comes into play when working with customers to set up the in-process module. There's also a document that is part of a certificate of conformance. In other words, for some organizations, they need to provide a document to their customers indicating that they have designed, manufactured, inspected the product per contractual, per regulatory requirements on it. And this is one of the greatest variabilities they see among all the customers. There is a standard document that is provided with the QCS customer module that does show basic information on a customer certificate of conformance or certificate of authenticity document that can be provided. But again, the content of this is often driven by collecting all the inspection data from raw material receipt, inspection, lot control, material traceability, production test data, final inspection data, paperwork being produced, a whole bunch of things going on. And again, this is one of the areas that's often very critical for some organizations, and it's often one that's very unique, and it changes and varies from company to company as well. So as we move on to the third of the modules that we'll be talking about today, this is the QCS customer module. Again, the same attempt at humor on my part is that it is exactly the same as the supplier in the in-process module, only it's different. And again, the point where it's different is now we're tying into customers, we're tying into customer orders, and we're tying into customer returns. But the same basic premise about how we work with the software is it carries through. There is a process flow diagram that when you activate the customer shipment control part of QCS, this flow diagrams that get executed to determine that if a product has to go through QC, if you must go through a disposition process, and may be required to print out a CFC, and then and only then would you be getting to the point where you're going to be able to ship product out to your customers. On the return side of things, this flow diagram here is identical to the one that we looked at for the purchase order receipt, except for the very top part of the process. So whenever you do a customer RMA return transaction, that can create a QC receiver exactly the same way we saw with a purchase order receipt transaction, creating a receiver. And then once it gets into QC, once it goes to this inspection, disposition, MRB, corrective action process, it's all managed the same. So there's a consistency of the methodology about how you execute the inspection process, the non-conformance process, the corrective action process within the organization. There's also a customer complaints tracking capability, the voice of your customer. And this is, again, a representative flow diagram, a little bit different from the other ones that we've seen. And what I'm going to do now is hit a key, and we're going to jump back into the SyteLine application, and we're going to take a look at this customer complaint form. again, I listed here that we do. So again, this is a standardized SyteLine form you can use to record customer complaints within the system. So in my example here, we have an issue with one of our bike product lines that we've identified as a safety issue. On these, and these are all codes that you set up. Customer called to complain, they went on a bike ride, they had an accident, the grips came off, they want to talk with our lawyer. What we identified was from our own cause review, determine the cause of this problem. So due to the grips not being mounted during the production process, so we're going to be remedying the situation with the customer, and we're going to be initiating a corrective action document, which can be done over here to initiate a methodology, a process change during the manufacture of the bicycle. And then from a closure standpoint, we have the ability to record the customer satisfaction, both in text form as well as in simple rating form. And as you'll note, there are a large number of date fields available here that we can use to track our responsiveness from the time that the customer called until we respond to them with analysis of the problem and a recommendation and solution from the time that we said, here's what we're going to do it, until the time that we actually did it. Was there a follow-up requirement with the customer as well? So there's a good number of metrics that can be derived from tracking the customer complaint. And again, it's all inside the SyteLine application, so it's working off the same customer master form that you work with on the rest of the system, as well as the same item master form that is available anywhere within the SyteLine application. So from a customer standpoint, again, the shipping, outbound, customer RMA, customer complaint tracking, and this is kind of the big finish slide, if you will, highlighting the major functional pieces associated with each of the three modules. One of the questions will commonly be asked is, do we need to get all three? The answer is no, depending upon the organization. You can choose to get just Supplier and then decide later if you want to get the in-process or the customer module. And also, even if you get all three modules at the same time, the implementation process can be done. So we might choose to implement in-process first, and then QCS customer, and then QCS supplier. So there's lots of variability over here, and it's not the same as the Big Bang approach commonly associated with a full-blown SyteLine implementation, because we're working in this QC module environment. We can choose to implement these modules in a stepped, phased fashion if we want. I'll also mention, outside the scope of this presentation, there's a fourth module that is available that focuses on and recognizes that of all of the material things that the QCS supplier, customer, and in-process module does, it also recognizes that the quality world encompasses and touches people that are not involved directly with SyteLine and may or may not involve a part number. So some of the topics that you see listed here are ones that are addressed by the enterprise module, whether it's topics such as listed here or change management function is listed, and a basic beginner set, if you will, on process management for other non-order, non-item-based processes within the system.
First question was kind of a general one, asking what's involved in setting up QCS.
Okay, that's a good question. There is a number of files and codes that need to be set up with QCS, reason codes, disposition codes, process codes. If we have a quality management system in place, we often just pull those codes or those options out of your QMS system. If not, we can work with you to establish a set of codes that makes sense for your organization. The largest number of things that need to get set up is commonly the item master, and there are ways that we can help automate that process of taking, your parts master in SyteLine might be 10,000 is a very simple count, but when it comes to QCS, there may be only 1,000 things you track, so we have some ways to help automate that uploading process of part numbers. It is not nearly as large an activity as the original SyteLine data conversion is concerned, because we're commonly drawing off a lot of things that are already set up inside SyteLine as far as that activity is concerned. Okay. Is there another one?
Yes. What has been your experience with customizations and enhancements that your customers have needed with QCS?
It varies a little bit by module. With the supplier module, that is most common standard way of doing things we see. So in that area, there's often little or no customization that's needed. When we move into the production side of things, as you might gather from the variability of companies and how they set up jobs and routings and travelers and everything, often there is a need to take a closer look at how they're currently doing things, identify which of those best fit with QCS, and then there may be some customization the area of reporting and data collection is concerned on it. But again, using the base module has been pretty much the basic capability. There's only been a few cases in very high-end aerospace requirements where there was significant addition that needed to be on to support some of the unique aerospace defense industry requirements above and beyond what's standard with QCS.
I've got one more.
Excellent. Fire away.
Question is asking which versions the QCS solution is available for with SyteLine.
Okay. The ones that we're looking at here today are available, actually going back as far as the Simex Progress days of 6, but anybody who's on 7, 8, or 9 will see the basic capability that we have here today. There were a few things added in the customer module back in SyteLine 7 and 8 days that might not be available on the older version of SyteLine 7, but pretty much what you're seeing here, the core functionality has been around for a while and well supported by Infor on through the current SyteLine 9 release as well.
Excellent. That concludes the questions that we have for now. At that, I think what we're going to do is go ahead and conclude. Ken, I'd again like to thank you very much for the material that you've shared. If you'd like to fire off questions to us, you can do that. You're invited to do that. Send those to info, I-N-F-O, at godlan.com. We'll be happy to follow up on those questions with Ken, get those answers back out to you. So with that, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us and hope that you all have a pleasant day.